Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for getting back so promptly. This is a panel I've been particularly looking forward to. Looking forward to asking Richard Arnold what he thinks of my Louis van Gaal branded file here. We're going to start this session very, very quickly. So if you could take your seats and we'll be getting going. Just one quick reminder, blue forms, if you could fill them in when you get the chance. I'm going to hand over to somebody who needs no introduction to moderate this session, Jake Humphrey.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Afternoon, everybody. Hope you didn't eat too much cheesecake, and I hope you're ready and fired up with plenty of questions for our panel, because we are going to be talking about the evolving business model for football clubs. And I guess if there is one sport in this country that has embraced business in more ways than any other, then it probably is football. So this should be really interesting. And alongside me, I've got the Chief Executive of the League Managers Association, Richard Bevan, is with us today. We've also got, I think, a man with plenty of insight into what it's like to run a football club. The Group Managing Director from Manchester United, Richard Arnold, is in the middle. And at the very end, I'm on my best behaviour because that's my boss, the head of BT Sport, Simon Green, is also here. So I think a round of applause for all three of our panel to start with. We will be coming to you for questions in about 20 minutes' time, so do start thinking about anything that we don't cover that you'd love to know about. But let's get going then by talking about business and football and start with the question, are football clubs now simply businesses?
I think they are definitely businesses. They're also community assets. I think probably a football club has got twofold objective: economic success. They want sporting success. And I think the importance from looking at as a supporter and somebody working in the game is looking to see the culture of being embraced, making sure that the way clubs are run with transparency, good communications, accountability, and I think making sure that it's not a boom or bust leadership, but it is far more attuned to normal business practices.
Do you see yourselves as a club for the fans at Manchester United, or do you see yourselves as a business and they're your customers?
I think that it's a unique position to be in, you know, with the way that fans feel about a club. And that is the heart of everything we do. It drives the success we have with TV partners. It fills the stadium, it gives the atmosphere, and you can never take that for granted. That having been said, in 19 whatever, the first time a player got paid and ticket money was taken to come and watch the game, the income had to match the costs, and you had to get that right. So the financial measurement of success is critical to being successful on the pitch. If you're not successful off the pitch, it's very difficult to be successful on the pitch. Those hands wash each other. So whilst some of the disciplines you use to be a business are really important, you have to remember what's at the heart of what you do, and that is that engagement with the fans, both at the stadium and the hundreds of millions of people around the world watching.
And that still remains the case. It's not the engagement with BT Sport or Sky Sports, who are obviously bringing in many millions of pounds per match.
I think that the way that the world's evolved, you know, Manchester United have digital contact and contact 120 million fans directly around the world. Well, but you have to stop and think about that. With, you know, the work that our TV broadcasters do, that live product, the work you'll do around that is how most of our fans experience it. But then being able to get in touch with them, just as you could speak to fans who attend the game, is very, very important. And I think that, I think even if you wanted to divorce yourself from the fans, which why would you? But there's no opportunity to do that. It's a must. It's a must for any successful club to make sure you're listening, you're understanding, you're watching what's happening in that area, and you're engaging with them. And through digital technology, that's easier than it's ever been.
Because if a club gets divorced from its fans and the stadium is half full and the viewing figures drop, that's an issue for someone like BT Sport, isn't it? So you need to be the people that are driving millions of pounds into the football clubs, because it means you get the rights, but at the same time not leaving the fans disenchanted and making them still feel like football is there for them, not there for us.
I don't know if we need to be driving the millions of pounds into the clubs. But for me, the question was whether or not football clubs are businesses. Absolutely, to me, they are a business. But almost ahead of that often is that they're a brand, and they're a different brand to different sections of their customer base or our customer base. So it might be a different brand and how it's perceived and consumed overseas for Manchester United fans than it might be for Manchester United fans who I was going to say living in and around Manchester, but living in and around the UK who attend the games.
Yeah.
First and foremost, they are brands, but football clubs have multiple different stakeholders and multiple different fan bases.
And we've talked about, Manchester United. We're sort of talking about Premier League clubs here. Does the same apply? And you will have plenty of contact with your managers who are operating in League One and League Two in the Championship. Does the same apply to clubs at that level?
There are significant differences from, obviously, in the 4 leagues. 160 odd managers and coaches have lost their jobs this season. So dealing with the clubs and the termination agreements, you get
Say that number again. How many?
161
this season.
Managers and coaches this season. Yeah. So you get to see a lot of the way that the club runs the business. And picking up just briefly on a point Richard made there as well, I think a global audience. You hear a lot of people talking about global audiences and how many millions of people are watching the game, but actually it's probably almost becoming more of a global network. And I think whether you are Shrewsbury Town, which is my club, or whether you're Man United, or even where you're abroad in one of the big clubs in Real Madrid, it's still the way of the future is definitely how we communicate with our fans, making sure we don't leave behind the core audience, and making sure that it's still the romance of going to a football match. It's not like going to a concert or a film. And I think the business and the community aspect, that's where the two have to live together. But certainly in the lower leagues, it's harder when resources are fewer. But equally, the football supporters' trusts and the impact that the football supporters can have in the lower leagues is bigger. They can help a club survive. They can, as in all clubs, they can be the vehicle in which a manager or a coach loses his job. But in the main, it's making sure that you get good run clubs, you get good advisors, good lawyers, good accountants, helping the game at all levels, making sure that clubs are making good decisions.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Supporters Trust, because we can talk about the news that's come out today from the Manchester United Supporters Trust. I wrote down the quote just before we came in. The Glazers running Manchester United, in their words, is an ownership crime to have extracted such huge sums of money out of the club. And they're banding around, £10 billion extracted, £1 billion extracted from Manchester United over the past 10 years, when I guess the fans are saying this money should remain in the club, it should be spent on players, it should be spent on infrastructure. Are they important to you, the Manchester United Supporters Trust? What do you see as their purpose?
I sit as chair of our fans forum, and we have 16 different representatives from all different groups, over 65, junior supporters, and representatives from all of those groups, including Must and Musa and other organised groups, are really important. So, the various mechanisms we use to listen are wide and broad, and, they would have their view. I wouldn't agree with it. I think a very long-term view has been taken. We work very hard to do our best at being a well-run club, and the work that's gone into engagement and other activities stands on its own. So, but that having been said, as I said before, listening to fans, be that on Facebook, Twitter, conducting surveys. We survey 80,000 fans in 60 countries around the world once a quarter to make sure we keep up to date on opinions and how they're done. So yes, it's very important that there are fans groups, and some have high profiles, some are unknown, but listening to those, and the ultimate challenge for football club directors is balancing up those views. And anyone who's raised any subject associated with football in a social setting, be it in a pub, for as many people as there'll be different opinions. And the challenge of a director is to balance up those opinions, both for and against, and make good long-term decisions. And I think we've got an excellent track record of doing that.
But you can see, can you, how big business coming into a football club can leave fans disenchanted at times. I mean, you go to the Man United training complex and there's the huge Aon advertising there, your training kits sponsored, logos obviously all over Old Trafford, which means the players are earning phenomenal sums of money, and your manager can spend £59 million on a winger, and as the pressure gets greater, managers are losing their jobs all the time. Footballers feel the pressure as well, so they don't go on social media and they don't want to be too close to the fans because there are issues in that area as well. Is there a problem that as business gets greater and bigger, and more involved in football clubs, the fans just get pushed further and further out. They just get marginalised and squeezed. I'm interested to sort of get the thoughts of all three of you on what the future is for fans at football clubs.
No, I don't believe that. I think that, as I said, in the 1800s, 1900s, the first time we paid a player and took a penny or whatever it was for a ticket for the fan that came in, we were into a world where the economic factors affected what happened on the pitch. And many people still aspire to that amateur ethos and all of the sporting ideals that go with it. But some of those, the payment of players and needing to have strong financials for a strong club on the pitch, those are the realities of the modern game. In terms of how that translates into engagement with fans, I think that the money that comes in and the partners that we have, and again, you had a session earlier on about sponsorship and partnership. Good partnerships in that area actually enable us to open up huge channels and engagement. The work that Aon's done in 60 countries around the world with us, meeting with fans, running live events where they come and attend. When it's done well, actually that really stimulates the engagement with fans, and you can measure it on Twitter and Facebook and other Sina Weibo and the equivalents around the world, and you see that you can create a virtuous circle. Done badly, you have to be careful, but I think done well, it's a huge asset both economically and on an engagement basis.
I think what fans want will vary dramatically from league to league, from club to club, whether it's winning, whether it's survival, whether it's just doing better than last year. Probably not too many fans look at the business. Those supporters trust that do. I think they can make sure that a club doesn't have millions of pounds worth of debt, and if they are, they can police it in terms of media awareness. They want to make sure there's transparency, there's good communication. If there's distant ownership, decision making is often difficult, so they want to see who's running their club. And they can, I think, make a bigger difference than they are. If you look at the Football Supporters Federation, social media gives the fan a lot of power. The one project they've got at the moment, which we're hearing a lot about, is 20 is plenty, i.e. the cost of an away ticket. And there's an enormous amount of coverage. I think the Premier League have just launched a fund of 12 million, an away supporters fund. So I think on particular projects they can really do well. And equally in the lower leagues, where we have owners who should not be owning any business, let alone a football club, they can act as policemen, and they can put the individuals into the local media. So I see the role of the fan being far greater. Coming back a little bit to the global network, whether it's to do business, whether it's a fan in China, India, America, all the up and coming parts of the world are getting more interested in football, soccer. But the role of the fan is really, really important.
There are different models though, aren't there? If you look around the world, you go into Germany, for example, where the fan engagement, the relationship that the fans have with the clubs on a formal basis in terms of ownership is very different to how it is over here. Perhaps it's a cultural thing about how Germany has embraced that kind of system that we haven't done over here. But there are ways of fan engagement with football clubs on a very, very constructive basis, and models that exist elsewhere that we could look to I think improve the engagement that we have with fans formally into football.
Plenty of people talk about the Bundesliga as being something for us to aim for in this country. Do you look at the way that the likes of Bayern Munich or Dortmund run themselves, the ticket prices they charge, the atmosphere created in the grounds, and try and learn something? Or do you think we do it better?
I wouldn't sit here and say that we don't spend a lot of time looking at lots of other models. There's certain aspects of how it's done in the US that are world class, and we look at that. The Bundesliga, I think some of the fan engagement pieces in terms of, in particularly around how you maintain atmosphere. We introduced a singing section season before last, and that was out of learnings we saw in aggregating fans that want to sing in stadium, and looking at that and trying to better yourself.
I can't believe we've reached a world where you have to have a singing section, can you?
It
It's just madness.
As we found with implementing it, it turns out not everybody wants to sit next to someone that's singing. So, you do putting the people of a like mind together. Actually has worked very well. But it's, that that was something that the fans brought to us, and you talk about fan groups. That was something fan groups brought forward as something they wanted. And again, you may not agree with everything they say, but listening, seeing whether it works, it has worked. It's been a fantastic aid in a number of things.
In Germany, there's one lesson which you don't read very much about. We all know that not one individual or one company can own a football club in Germany, but the supporters and the supporter organisations in Germany, they have a very clear guidelines to how they can operate. So I think you'll see a lot of supporters. I think there's 40 supporters trusts in our 92 clubs. But often they don't know how best to sit on a board, who to put forward to be their director. I think Swansea, the Supporters Trust, actually own 20-odd% of Swansea. So if the valuation of Swansea has just jumped by 100 million, I'm sure that they've got a wealthy organisation now. How do they help generate revenue? You're not going to get dividends, but it's a capital asset. What can you do with it? And I think the FA and the authorities could definitely give more guidelines to how a Supporters Trust should and could have a business role within the running of our clubs.
This moves us into a slightly new area actually now. Let's talk about ownership of football clubs. Not just in the Premier League, but all the way through. And perhaps sometimes in the lower leagues, you have people running football clubs that maybe we wouldn't choose to be running our club if we were a fan of that football club. And without naming names or giving us clubs or specific examples, give us an idea what it's like for some of the managers who are a member of your association to be dealing with the kinds of owners that sometimes run clubs, not just in the Premier League, but League One, League Two.
It does vary dramatically from league to league. In terms of overseas owners, it's not really the nationality that's important. It's their respect for the history, the tradition, the philosophy of the club, the culture, the supporters, and it's how they run it. The problem when you have an overseas owner is where decision making is made from a distant country and there's not the right information that's going across. So poor information, a lack of information is leading to poor decision making. But in the main, it's St George's Park where the LMA are based. We've run 14 masterclasses on managing upwards. We've got diplomas. So in order for a coach to succeed as a manager and as a manager to develop as a leader, then they must have better communications with the people running the club. And unfortunately, in some of our lower league clubs, some of the people running the clubs on the recruitment process, shall we say, in finding the right people to run some of the clubs, in our, of what we've seen in the last 6 or 7 years, is there's a long way to go. In the bigger clubs, where we've got probably 20 or 30 billionaires, they've got good advisors, they've got good legal, good accountancy. If you looked at the clubs that have been into administration, which there's been 50 administrations since 1992, 24 investigations and winding up orders from HMRC, they tend to be the lower run clubs. And where they have cash flow problems, they shouldn't hide behind those cash flow problems. They should come out and talk about it. And one of the reasons why we have less court cases at the moment is because we debate with the clubs. If you can't afford to sack your manager, but you are terminating his contract, let's talk professionally about it rather than accusing him of gross misconduct and going down the legal route. And that is getting better. And we do definitely see the process of running football clubs getting better. I just think that sometimes football is a little bit like a PLC without a head office. And I like to see the head office, whether that's the Football League being in control of the clubs rather than vice versa, whether it's the Premier League, which are really beginning to give help to their clubs and help to the lower leagues. And the FA in particular, the FA compliance, so greater pyramid, and get the top leading a little bit more will definitely help.
What do you think? More control over people owning clubs in this country? And if so, what's the answer?
I don't know if you can impose that kind of control over the people actually owning the football clubs, whether that's realistic under competition law and so on, or company law. But I think as far as the better administration of the clubs is concerned, I think it feels as though financial fair play, which has been introduced relatively recently, which is still emerging, it feels like, in even the amounts that financial fair play from that's being imposed from UEFA and so on into this market for those clubs that partake in UEFA competitions and so on. It feels as though that is starting, even though I don't think the financial fair play model that is currently in place Not that I think anybody actually understands it from top to bottom, but it is starting a process of having football clubs at the top end start to think more sensibly about the running of their businesses. I believe that there is a financial fair play system in place for the lower leagues as well, but I'm not so certain, and Richard can comment better than me about how it's being conducted in the lower leagues and whether or not the actual setup for that is going to help the kind of problems that Richard highlights. But financial fair play is a start.
I think you also got to help the clubs balance the books. I think in the Premier League, all, if not the majority of clubs, are making a profit, and if we can, if that can permeate down into the lower leagues, then people looking to buy into clubs are going to be looking to buy for business reasons, for investment reasons, as opposed to hobby or for some trophy asset, for the wrong reasons. And the one thing I think that the stakeholders in the game can do more is help look a little bit more medium term. If you looked into the people working here in the room, probably a whole cross-section of where people work, I'm sure your organisations are looking and thinking, where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years? We don't see that enough in football. I'm sure Manchester United do, but actually collectively we don't.
So are you saying that, I don't think there's a great long queue of brilliant owners waiting to go and buy Leyton Orient now that they've been knocked down a division, or to go and get involved in Bristol Rovers or something like that. So are you saying the owners that are there can stay in place if they want to, but we need some kind of help alongside them? We need some strong chief execs rather than owners to come in, or maybe something right from the very top?
One very good thing that I'm pleased to see the Football League have been doing with clubs. Clubs in League 1 and 2 now have to give figures in advance. They have to give their projected expansion plans. So rather than looking retrospectively and people not really paying attention to it, let's look forward. What is your plan? And if you can help clubs create a bottom line and put it into profit, you're going to find local businessmen. Manchester United have had a butcher and a brewer owning it in the past. Those days are probably gone for the Premier League and the multi-billion owners, although the valuations of our clubs at the top is massive. I'm really concerned at helping the lower league clubs, and then we will get the local businessman who probably at the moment is thinking the last thing I want to do is own this football club.
The Glazers must hate it though. I mean, they've had a successful business, they've got billions of pounds in the bank, more than they had if you listen to the Man United Supporters Trust. They want to run the club how they want to run the club, don't they? They don't want financial fair play, they don't want to be hamstrung in the way they run their club.
I think some of what Richard just said is very sensible. In any organisation, if you had poor decision making, a lack of vision, and a short-termist approach, whether that's the butchers, the bakers, the candlestick makers, or a football club, it's not going to do very well. And yesterday was the 10-year anniversary of our current owners, and that long-term approach they've taken, the vision they've shown, the decisions they've made have been borne out on and off the pitch, and they've been strong. I think looking at the state of the game and the overall picture, from collective bargaining through FFP and all of these other areas, being supportive of that to make sure that the game is well governed is an example where, and again, our owners have extensive experience from the NFL and other businesses. So that vision that they brought and that knowledge that they brought, where they'd seen the NFL, where the games run profitably, the clubs are run profitably in the US and the teams. So it's bringing that to bear, and that's borne fruit. Going from a couple of £100 million aggregate loss to a couple of £100 million aggregate profit in the space of a year is transformational. And again, to what Richard said, the motivation for an owner coming in where the price of participation was to lose, some of the clubs losing £200 million a year, and with a very difficult path to see how that changed historically. And historically that was the case. Many clubs were the benevolent activity of a local businessman that had made good, and that isn't a good and sustainable basis for any club going forward, that they're dependent on the equivalent of sugar daddy money coming in each year, because the moment that stops, that club ceases to be viable. And I think it's good for the game in total that the work that's done in distributing the income that that BT have put into the sport. The Premier League announced £1 billion going out of the league, and I think those things coupled with the FFP legislation will make sanity of the running of a football club, and allowing that ticket money, going back to those first 1900s, taking the ticket money, paying the players, getting that balanced is going to be good for everyone. It'll allow for investment, be that investment in players, in facilities, in stadiums. I think that will be very positive.
And how much time do you spend talking or thinking about clubs lower down the pecking order than Manchester United? And how they can be better supported by you and by the Premier League?
For us, it's a pretty full-on job doing what I do. We spend time around the FA Cup with clubs from outside the competition we play in, and obviously we're heavily engaged with some of the clubs on loaning out young players. And Richard and I were chatting earlier on about the benefits that come across the piece from going away from Manchester United and playing for teams other than us. Often guys 18, 19 years old, for them to go out and just see how tough life is for other professionals and to play first team football in whatever league it is, and that's been of huge benefit. And I think that's the main area of interaction for us from one week to the next. Work pretty hard, staying on top of what I'm supposed to be doing.
I imagine. Do you think they do enough to help the clubs below them, those at the top table of the football pyramid?
I don't think it's up to Manchester United. Manchester United run their business in a very professional way. It's up to the leagues and the FA.
Right.
And where our government decided that the FA wasn't doing enough, they have a select committee that went on for a couple of years. Myself, Martin O'Neill and Steve Coppell presented at one, although majority of the time was Martin O'Neill talking about Brian Clough.
Not a bad meeting, to be
no,
fair.
No, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
But for example, if you're going to make a really big difference in Leagues 1 and 2, it's the control of wages. It's probably the same actually in the leagues. In the Championship, if you have 50% of the clubs, as they were a couple of years ago, spending their on wages greater than their revenue, you're going to have a problem. Now in League 1, it's 60% ratio to wages to turnover, and in League 2, it's 65. My concern is making sure that we help the clubs, the FA and the leagues, help the clubs write the business plan, and also police.
Are you pro wage cap?
I'm pro a soft cap, yes. The hard cap wouldn't be appropriate, but a soft cap, which is in place in League 1 and 2 already, is something that can bring stability, credibility. But rather than putting sticking plasters on each of these problems, I'm going straight to the top. Want to see better leadership, better training. Again, the total spend on management training, this whole conference is about business. The total spend, I think I asked Simon the other day at BT what you would spend on management training would be 0.5%, 1% of turnover in the many, many millions. And I'm sure many people in the audience would be, if they're working for a PLC, would be spending millions. The total spend in football up until 24 months ago on management training of its technical staff was zero. And there comes the sink or swim. And the same, making sure that St George's Park now, I think, can act as a hub, whether it's a recruitment process, helping coaches and managers get jobs, or whether it's a secretary of football club, a director of football that we were talking as well about earlier. The whole group of people that run a club working on the same bus, working together and making it work.
Sure. Okay, we're going to come to questions in the audience in just a moment, but before we finish up, talking about the caps, I'd imagine both of you are anti-wage cap because it would stop some of the best players from coming to the Premier League and appearing on your channel, and equally the likes of Angel Di Maria might not be playing at Old Trafford if indeed there was a wage cap.
We welcome the financial rules that are imposed on clubs in terms of percentage of turnover to regulate the businesses appropriately, but certainly not a hard cap on wages doesn't work.
Even if it allowed the likes of Hull or Swansea or Southampton to challenge for the top four?
Well, as a television executive, football on television, I don't like saying this, but I'm actually a Manchester United fan. I'm certainly not a Manchester United fan outside of my day job, but when it comes to television audiences, Manchester United is the
because of the players.
And yes, exactly. So, yeah, Manchester United being successful, Manchester United finishing fourth might not be good enough for Richard here, but the fact that they're in the Champions League for us next season is important. No question about it. So,
yeah, from our point of view, we voted for cost controls. The way it was in football catches a lot of flack, often deserved for some things, but the way fair play was introduced within Europe, within the Premier League, within the Football League, and the impact that has, we voted for that. I think it's been structured pretty intelligently and has had a positive effect. In terms of how that translates, when you look at the Money League, which is not the one most fans look at, but as an executive, you look at the league and you see that the Premier League clubs and indeed some of the Championship clubs are doing very, very well in that Money League, and that's indicative that that model is working in terms of how that was implemented with Europe, the Premier League, and the Football League acting
on turnover or on revenue?
It works on profitability, right? So because equally, what you don't want is to stop clubs that innovate and move forward and grow, and that can be successful in growing their income and doing it sustainably. You don't want to stop them. So, and again, any system, people will find ways of trying to come close to the edge of the rules or even step over them. But the ones we've got in aggregate have had a very good effect on the sport as a whole, and not just the Premier League teams, the Championship and Division 1 teams, that the break-even tests and the cap on cost increases that went into the Premier League has had as I said, it's brought sanity to that and some stability to it, and that can only be for the good of the long-term game.
And out of the top 40 clubs, profitable clubs in Europe, we've got 20 of them. Obviously the big clubs, but a good proof of the pudding is Southampton. They made a profit of 33 million, I think it was, last year, and their Premier League position went up. So you can perform on and off the pitch.
Okay. Any questions in the room? If you would like to get involved, feel free to put your hands up. We'll start at the gentleman at the back there. I think there's microphones that will come around to you, so we'll get a microphone to the gentleman there as well.
Martin Kay from SNTV. My question, you've mentioned social media. It sounds like a universal good. It's great for fan engagement, it's great for feedback, it's great for building a network outside the UK. Given how much of your business model is TV based, how much do you worry about the likes of Meerkat and Periscope and that threat to the live television signal?
I think you can both answer that, actually.
How much of our business model is
threatened? I suppose, if people are periscoping and vining, is it an issue for you? If you can see every goal on Vine before it's on your channel, is that a problem?
It's clearly a problem if it encourages people to not take on a television subscription for us. Yeah, and piracy is another issue that is ongoing. But I think the question really is more addressed at the football club specifically than at the broadcaster, isn't it?
I mean, our experience is the fans are a pretty discerning lot, and as good a cameraman as people with the products you mentioned may be, they can't compete with the quality of coverage we see. And we were talking just earlier on about how the competition in that space and the work that BT have done and the way they've covered it has really stimulated and challenged Sky, and actually the overall coverage has improved. Going back to our fans, there are people who, by necessity or desire, may want to watch pirate channels of one description or another. The overwhelming majority want to watch it in HD with, intelligent punditry and really good camera angles and slow-mos and all the bits and pieces that come with quality broadcast. I think in respect of those other bits and pieces, if you look at Frozen, the film, which
How can we ignore it? If anyone has a daughter or son about 4 years old.
A huge amount of income flows back to Disney from all of the interpretations and the pieces of work that fans do, generating their own content. I must admit, I'm not that au fait with it, having only 2 sons, but it flows back in terms of that stimulation. And we've seen a similar thing, be it mock-ups of goals or other bits and pieces. The work that comes through fans having camera media events, it doesn't detract from the high quality broadcast, because how could it? The tens of millions of pounds that go into producing these games and the coverage they have, it's fantastic. The viewing figures are reflective of that, and I don't think one fan with a camera in a stadium is going to erode that at all.
The one area which I think it might be interesting, I used to work for the Professional Cricket Association, spent a lot of time in India, And if India's a growing market, it's not really brought into soccer quite yet. It's getting there slowly. I can't really see up in Mohali people watching on normal televisions. I can see them watching on tablets and mobile phones. So I think that marketplace, China, Asia, I'm sure there's going to be certain parts that in the future that's going to be a big part of a growing audience.
I mean, it's an area though that needs to be thought about, because you might think people would prefer to watch our games covered by 10 cameras all in high definition or 4K in the future. But if Louis van Gaal, let's just imagine for a minute, decides to periscope his team talk ahead of the final game of the season, that would have millions of people watching it. It gets people closer to your football club, closer to the manager, but I'm sure you'd be sitting there thinking, don't do that. Let us take our camera in the dressing room and we'll film that. But there is a beauty, there's a rawness to social media that the fans love.
Football is, I don't want to say it's a circus, but the more and more of that kind of thing that is going on, the more and more interest is generated in the game, the more and more interest is generated in taking out television subscriptions ultimately. So the wider the product gets distributed and the bigger these brands become, whether they be via other platforms, it does generate in the end more interest, which for us as a broadcaster is a good thing, and ultimately that's more money that goes back into the clubs. It has to be controlled though. That's the ultimate thing. I think what we're saying. It can't just be completely unregulated. It has to be monitored and dealt with maturely, depending on what the platform is and when.
Louis van Gaal on Twitter. That would be
it's a
interesting.
good idea. Wouldn't it? You got a very good idea.
Another question over here, yes sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. Norman Fletcher, the Professional Golfers Association. One comment, if I may. Having watched Blackburn Rovers for over 50 years, I would like to change the title to examining the dissolving business model for football clubs. But having said that, you've mentioned financial fair play regulations. Do you think that they're being introduced effectively, because they only seem to be coming in once the clubs have been relegated from the Premiership? Is it just because the funding of financing the Premiership and the ability of the lawyers within the Premiership is putting in a glass ceiling?
Norman, I think if I was a Blackburn Rovers fan, I would be pleasantly pleased in terms of the slight change in the tide. It goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. Overseas owner comes in, they get poor advisors, they get more poor advisors, they get the wrong people in running the club, they remove 3 of the most respected people running football clubs in Britain. We took them into the High Court over non-payment of wages. Their lawyer was accused of lying. They've now recognised, and the family member I spoke to recognised that they need to get good advice. Now, if the Venky's had come into the Premier League and said, we want to buy a football club, we want to invest in Britain's biggest, in the biggest sport in the world, we want to invest in Blackburn Rovers, how can you help us, please? And the leagues have said, you want to make sure you recruit this way, you want to make sure you get good advisors, the secretary of the football club's well, you want a good accountant, a good lawyer, don't change this, consistency, and they're now going for consistency. So again, it is a really apt point about Blackburn Rovers, and they do recognise that consistency and running with good professional people is going to be the way that they get back up the table.
I think people often look at football clubs and they see them as different to businesses, but they're just a business, aren't they? And if you can run yourself properly like any other business and you get the right advisors in, you should, particularly in the Premier League, be successful.
Well, this is really a question again for the clubs, but it's, again, these multiple stakeholders, the fans, they want results in the very, very short term. So, but running a business in the long term is perhaps addressing with the issues in a different way than just making sure that you are going to avoid relegation because you need to win next week's games. Those are 2 different aspirations that don't necessarily dovetail.
Because I'm sure some Newcastle United fans would look at Mike Ashley, for example, and not believe that he's ever been able to run a business as brilliantly successful as Sports Direct, and then how he can make what seems from the outside like such strange, big business decisions concerning his football club.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specifics of what's going on at Newcastle.
But you know the stories and what gets talked about.
But I think the similarity with any organisation, be it a business, a club such as ours, is that if as I said previously, if you don't have a clear vision, if you don't have quality and professionalism in your execution, if you're not taking a long-term view, the only thing you could have is that you're lucky, right? So, and again, going back to the point you made, which the question originally raised around the impact of creating a glass ceiling, I think was the question you asked. There's a trade-off between what one man's cheating is another man's investment in financial fair play in terms of pouring money in. The rules are there to stop football clubs losing money, so that whoever's owning them has a sustainable business. That is what the rules are aimed at achieving. The flip side of the rate of change that can be achieved is stability. And again, we were talking earlier on about the impact it has on managers. When they rise rapidly, it's difficult. It comes with new pressures going from the Championship to the Premier League, or indeed any league into the next one up. It comes with new pressures and new problems. Going the other way is just must be an unimaginably difficult situation. And the rules do have a degree of stabilising effect, but they allow teams to perform on merit. And I think preventing losses and generating stability is something that is good for everybody in whichever division they're in.
Okay. There was a question a bit further down here. Gentleman with the lanyard, right? Do you have a question, sir? Just making your notes. Did you have a question? No? Okay. But yes, in the middle here. Hi.
Hi, I'm Kerry Keenan from Celtic Football Club. In Scotland, we're in a very different position to the EPL clubs, and a huge part of our business model is European football. I'm just wondering how important the Champions League is in terms of your future business model, and also given that Manchester City were doing 2-for-1 on group stage games this season, I'm wondering from BT Sport, who've just bought the rights to it, do you think we're going to see reconstruction on a European level? Do you think the Champions League as it is coming to an end?
No, I don't think. I think the Champions League, the Premier League, the Football League. I think that we're seeing these competitions becoming more and more popular season on season. I think that's what's demonstrated in there being bigger rights payments, bigger audiences. Season on season, it's been going on for years and years. The popularity of football just keeps going forward. I think there are specific issues that we could address separately for Scotland, and the way that the league or the competition in Scotland has had difficulties in context against the English league over the last 20 years. But for Celtic and for BT Sport and next season with the Champions League, I'm just like I'm going to become a Manchester United fan, I'm going to become a Celtic fan as well through the qualification and playoff stages of the Champions League going to next season.
And you can give us a really interesting insight actually into what life is like at a club the size of Manchester United when you don't have the Champions League for a season. How much of a blow is it on the business side and on the football side?
Well, there's two answers to that. I mean, if you ask anybody at the club, how important is it? If whatever you called the competition, not being at the top table that you can be in is a matter of pride. It's where the players want to play. It's where the fans want to see us, and not being there hurts, right? So it's, we all aspire and see it as a key achievement milestone for us. Economically, it's a different question. Again, going back to those things that we talked about previously, in taking a long-term vision, in structuring your business to be profitable, in the diversified income streams we have, it's, I think, been a much smaller number than people expected in terms of how it's affected our profitability and our ability to compete economically for the best players and that sort of thing on the pitch. But that the fact that we manage our finances to make sure that we have a long-term view, was sustainable and solid, doesn't take away from the fact that not being in it was really painful. Tuesday and Wednesdays watching other clubs compete broke my heart all this year, and touch wood, next year that'll be different. But wanting to be in that top competition is vital to us.
But 4 or 5 years out of it would have an impact, wouldn't it? I mean, Liverpool, for example, people thought, get back into the Champions League and you can now go and compete for the likes of Di Maria. The reality is, when you've had that amount of time out, it's hard to compete for, not just for the price of the players, but for the salaries as well, unless you've got regular guaranteed Champions League football, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've only had a 1-year experiment and it's not our plan to make it a longer one. So, and dear God, let's not try that experiment again. But, I think whichever division you're in, wherever you are in the league, if you have a sustained period of not playing well, then things become more difficult. You see disaffection in your players, and that translates into difficulty all round. But again, a good club, you succeed off the pitch, you aim to succeed on it. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, and hopefully all things go in your favour. But you have to perform.
It remains the holy grail for players and managers still.
A lot of European managers I speak to talk about the FA Cup, because when they were growing up, they used to watch the FA Cup and it was a really big tournament. I'd like to see some talk around the fourth team actually being the FA Cup winners from each of the countries. I think that would really freshen up, would see a new series of teams and players coming through. Yes, we want to see Real Madrid and Barcelona's, but the same teams. But I think it'd be fantastic to see the FA Cup, and what that would do for the FA Cup in all the European countries would be really good.
Very good. I think we've got time for one more question, if there is one, right in the middle of the room. Make it a good one, as it's the last one. We're ending on this. No pressure.
Thanks. Simon Long from Replicom. Lord Coe this morning spoke about taking football out of the stadium and into the streets, and about the power of sport as social change. I just wonder whether it's driving broadband or driving revenue, how concerned you are about the state of participation in football at the moment and what you might be doing about it.
Who wants to go first on that one? Simon?
Well, I understand where Lord Coe is coming from on that particular issue, but I don't think it just is something that is for football. I think it's a generational thing, or how youngsters are partaking in sport generally. And so it certainly is an issue that, and perhaps for us in this room who might be England fans, wanting to see our national team develop over the next generation, you need to have kids playing sport. I believe that for football particularly, the amount of football that is on television isn't one of the factors that's affecting participation rates in football. I think that other sports have different issues around that, and whether or not there's national television coverage and so on, those are different. But your question was related to football. I don't believe that that there is an effect that television coverage is having on participation rates. As far as the other platform use, you're suggesting broadband and so on, uptake and so on, is affecting participation rates for youngsters. Again, I think that there are other social issues that are going on that are lessening the opportunities for children to play free and open street football.
I think it's a very good point. The closer that our top clubs can get to grassroots, then the better for the game. Talk about the business and the community asset. Football Foundation is UK's biggest sports charity, and I think they donate through the investment from the leagues and the FA something in the region of 30 million. And I think if we could help them with more research, and certainly we were debating with managers going into and supporting charities like Street Games, I think it's a really, really important thing. I think it probably the most important point of the conference from my perspective is how do you get the top clubs, how do you get all of the leagues working closer with the grassroots? And you need a little bit better research into where you should be putting the money, 5-a-side pitches, 11-a-side pitches, but that is a real focus.
Anything to add, Richard?
Yeah, I think Richard's hit the nail on the head. I can only speak for ourselves in the area we work in. The money that the Premier League puts into our foundation, we then go out with a programme called Street Reds. That's in 13 hubs in Manchester where we get kids who, not from an elite football point of view, but with an aim of participation and social cohesion, during school, after school, with their parents, getting them to play. Are we there yet? Do we think it's a job done? Absolutely not. As Richard said, there's a lot of work from more pitches, more coaches, training more coaches so that the fantastic parents who give up their time as volunteers to coach kids are good coaches. I think there's a lot we can do going forward, but I know that you'll hear from the Premier League that with the enhanced funding that we've got as a result of the latest round of TV, there's an expectation of a big increase in not only our solidarity payments to the Football League, but also to exactly that, the grassroots, and encouraging participation, not necessarily with a view to elite sport, just for the joy of playing.
Okay. Look, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your questions. But most of all, please join me in thanking Richard Bevan of the LMA, Richard Arnold from Manchester United, and Simon Green from BT Sport. Thank you. Thanks. Really interesting.
Thanks very much indeed Jake. Quick reminder, fill out your feedback form. We're going to take a break now. I sense there's still some questions for these gentlemen. Maybe you can catch them up in the networking area. Can I just remind everybody, if you're going to the reception tomorrow night, where Sir Ben Ainsley will be talking about his America's Cup bid, which I think is going to be a fascinating event, could you reconfirm that you are going? It's a heavily oversubscribed event, and we need to know. And also, if you haven't got a place there at the Post Office Tower tomorrow night, and you'd like to join a waiting list, you could do so as well. Go to the Telegraph information desk and do that. Back here, 3:15, no later. See you then.